Magnus Carlsen has played chess for a long time, and so he has made a lot of queen sacrifices. And in the video today, I'll be going through all of his games with queen sacrifices and trying to find some of the best games. Specifically, we'll look at 5 queen sacrifices that he has done. If you guys like these 5, let me know down below, and I'll gladly find 5 more that he has done, and we'll look at those as well in a future video. Let's start right now with the position that you see on the screen. It is white to move, and Magnus Carlsen in this game was rated 2072. So he was not a grandmaster yet, but he is still an incredible player, as you'll soon see from this incredible queen sacrifice. Now, everybody here would be looking at this side of the board. Of course, the knight here is seemingly being attacked, and everybody will be trying to find where should we move the knight to defend it. But Magnus Carlsen never tunnel visions on this side of the board and looks at the entire board as a whole, which is what you need to look at to find queen takes a7, the pawn on the other side of the board. Now, the only reason that this sacrifice works is because the king is still in the center. If the king was castled, this would not have worked. And so if we're looking at ways to recognize when you could do a queen sacrifice, or really when you can attack your opponent in general, if their king is in the center of the board and you have nice pressure along, with all of your pieces along diagonals and files, then you might be able to attack that king. And so here, queen takes a7. If the rook takes, well, then rook takes c8. The king has nowhere to go. You have to give back the queen. But importantly, there's this fork in the end, and you're just going to be up a lot of material after the king moves somewhere. You're going to win the rook, and with that, you're going to win the game. And that is why in the game, the player moved the rook here. It seems like that is, a pretty good move. The knight is defending the rook. But this is what makes this so beautiful. Magnus Carlsen finds a second queen sacrifice in a row. Queen takes b8. And here, if the knight takes, then rook takes c8. Well, now suddenly there's a square for the king. But Magnus saw this, and he realized that he doesn't need to win back the queen if he just wins an insane amount of material without the queen. So he won the rook, he won the other rook, he won the bishop here, and on top of that, if they take his knight, he will win this other knight. And in the end, he's just going to be up a piece because, these 2 rooks roughly cancel out this queen here. So an incredibly impressive find here by white. Let's move on to the second queen sacrifice. The second queen sacrifice was a little bit later in his career. He is now rated 2,385. And in this position, he finds a really beautiful way to put this knight to work. And the way he does this is by sacrificing his queen with queen takes g5. After the pawn takes, well, suddenly the knight controls this f7 square, so the rook can infiltrate. And even though the knight is not defended, that is not important because of this bishop, and actually rook takes h7 is going to be checkmate. And if the king instead decided to go here, well, not much better, because rook takes h7 is checkmate again. And so here, the important things to notice is that you have a very strong bishop along these light squares. And so if you can infiltrate with the rook, then that could cause a lot of damage. And that is kind of what helps you find these ideas, opening up this f-file for your rook to come into play. In this third queen sacrifice, Magnus Carlsen is now rated 2,450. He's getting closer to a grandmaster, and he finds incredible queen sacrifices as he did a couple of years ago. And so here he finds this really beautiful idea, queen takes f7. And after the queen recaptures, well, the idea is these rooks are going to do a lot of damage by infiltrating. So rook takes d7. Notice that the queen has to move. Now rook takes b7. Now the pawn pushed to g5, trying to give black a bit more space and also trap this bishop here. But now rook to c7, and you see that not only are these rooks very powerful, but this pawn here is also a very key player. So after queen to e6, rook to d7, and now rook takes c7. You don't even have to recapture the rook, although perhaps you even have enough compensation here with this extra pawn, but there's no need to do that because of rook to d8. And after the queen gets taken here, again, the pawn is just way too powerful. There's no way to stop this promotion, and with the pawn and with the queen and bishop, there's going to be a checkmate very, very shortly. Moving on to the fourth position in which Magnus Carlsen sacrificed his queen is here again with the white pieces. He is now rated 2,552, so once again higher than he was ever before. And after the move rook to f5, he finds a really beautiful queen takes f5 sacrifice. The idea here is after queen takes back, even though black here resigned, but let's say the queen takes back, well then c7. And moves like these, I think, are always scary to play as white because it doesn't seem as forcing as a check, right? Often if you sacrifice a piece, you want to have this series of checks that would allow you to win the game or win back material. But here, it's not a check, but it's just as forcing because by promoting, it's not as forcing, but it's very, very close to being as forcing because by promoting, you're basically going to win the game. And so you have this really threatening idea here with queen on c8, and that just leaves black with 0 resources to defend it. And so here, queen to b1 check, well, doesn't help because of simply bishop f1, and you're still with the same problem where most likely you're going to end up having to sacrifice the piece back, and your pieces are tied down here, you're down material, and I mean, this is just a horrible position to be in as black. For this final puzzle, Magnus Carlsen again is higher than he's ever been, 2,698, and he finds an incredible idea. Notice that black already, as the position stands, has quite a lot of problems. The king always has that back rank mate possibility. Also, all of these pieces are just really loosely defended. Notice that before this, white was threatening to take here, and if rook takes, then queen takes, and there's, mate threats, the knight's under attack. Just everything seems to be really, really falling apart here for black. But black seems to save the position with this c6 idea. Now the queen defends the rook. The rook, which is one of the major attackers, is getting kicked out, and it seems like everything is holding on. However, after the next move, the opponent of Magnus Carlsen realized that he was wrong and not everything is holding on, and he actually just resigned. And that move is queen to f5. An incredible find because, of course, if queen takes, once again, I pointed out the back rank checkmate ideas. So takes, and just like you would see in a puzzle rush, you have this checkmate here. And, well, if instead, you might be thinking, well, wait, what if the queen moves to like c7, for example? Well, then you can very simply, or the same thing with d6, simply take the rook, queen takes, and then you win e6 in the end. And you still have a very dominating position, above the material advantage that you, of course, have. You also have just really strong pieces here against this very weak king. And so just an incredible queen f5 find. And the thing, again, to point out, it's always important to notice your opponent's king's safety. In the first example, the king was wide open in the center, and that's what allowed for the queen sacrifice. Here, the king seemingly is safe, but of course this comes with drawbacks of this back rank checkmate idea. And so you always want to notice, how is my opponent's king positioned, and what are the weaknesses that I can try to exploit because of the opponent's king's position. Ladies and gentlemen, the positions that I showed you in today's video were only when Magnus Carlsen was a 2,072 rated player to a 2,693 rated player, which means that we have a ton more puzzles and queen sacrifices just like these ones to look at. So if you guys enjoyed these 5 queen sacrifices, let me know down below and I'll gladly make a part 2 with more amazing queen sacrifices. Like this video if you enjoyed this one, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.